Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Goodman. I'm a clinical psychologist and an anxiety and OCD specialist. And I've written a book called Your Anxiety Beast in You, a compassionate guide to living in an increasingly anxious world. Very timely for what's happening these days. You are watching So Booking Cool.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. It's Jewel B. Today's guest is a California-based clinical psychologist and anxieties and OCD specialist. He is also a speaker and lecturer. After popular demand, his second book, Anxiety Beast and You, a compassionate guide to living in an increasingly anxious world, will release sooner than expected. He is Dr. Eric Goodman.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Eric Goodman. How are you doing? How are you holding up during this pandemic time?
Well, this first couple of weeks were pretty disorienting, and now it's kind of a new, strange, semi-normal existence at home, quarantined with three surly teenage kids. Very interesting times, indeed. But so far, we're healthy and safe, and that's a good thing.
Healthy and safe, yes. So what have you observed? Like, have you made any observations during this pandemic crisis?
Yeah, actually, so a lot of people are anxious, obviously, and with my clients, I've seen it for some people greatly exacerbate whatever anxiety disorders, OCD they were dealing with. It didn't have to be contamination concerns necessarily, but just the stress of the situation. If you were anxious before, you're more anxious now. If you were depressed before, you could be more depressed now. So it's just kind of brought a lot of things to the surface. I think a lot of people are starting to get a little tired of being cooped up with people that they even love very much. People are missing their friends and their coworkers. And then I have a subset of clients who typically were people I was treating for social anxiety issues, and they've never been happier. They're kind of in their own introverted, isolated world, and they're playing their video games and really feeling better than they've felt in years. So I do see that kind of a mix, but I think overall, I think it's just an anxiety-producing time.
Mm-hmm. How many of your patients would you say suffer with anxiety?
100%.
Wow.
That's all I work with. I'm an anxiety disorder OCD specialist. So if you're coming to me, odds are you're dealing with some sort of clinical anxiety issue.
And I want you to break down what anxiety is, because it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's like we get the gist, we can catch on, but just break it down because you're an expert.
Well, so anxiety is what happens when your brain interprets a situation as a threat. So it could be a threat of safety, like in the coronavirus, but it could be a threat of social rejection. It could be a threat of not meeting a partner to date, being alone, things like that. And so as soon as our brain interprets something as a threat, and most of the time in life, modern life, the things that our anxiety is focused on, that our brain is focused on, aren't actual threats. So this coronavirus is a sort of an unusual situation in that there is a threat, and anxiety makes more sense nowadays. But as soon as our brain interprets something as a threat, then it begins to prepare us to fight or flee or freeze or appease or to do something to to deal with that threat. So we get loaded with dread and adrenaline to motivate us and give us energy to stay safe. The problem is with something like coronavirus, there's only so much we can do. And so anxiety is serving us actually remarkably well in that. So one of the things I had read early on was the modeling based on how many people were going to get coronavirus and were going to die was based on a real underestimation of how seriously people were going to treat the social distancing recommendations and mandates. And it turns out the fear of getting this coronavirus was incredibly motivating for people all through the world. And so when we're doing a good job as far as washing our hands and decontaminating and avoiding getting too close to people physically, it's because our anxiety is doing the right thing at the right time, which is important. When you don't have anxiety, then you tend to take unnecessary risks. But a problem is that washing our hands, social distancing, it's not enough for our anxiety. So even though we know logically we're doing what we can, anxiety says, no, the threat's still there, the threat's still there, figure it out, solve it, get away from it, fix it, do something now, right? And we can't. And so we're left with this residual fight or flight energy. No, there's no threat that we can vanquish in the moment. And so our anxiety levels are naturally higher and will likely stay at least somewhat higher until the all clear is given. And we don't know when that is. And anxiety doesn't like that we don't know when that is. It wants to know.
Which age group would you say suffers with anxiety the most?
Well, I don't know that there is one age group that tends to suffer with it, or even a demographic. I think anxiety tends to impact clinically about 30 to 40% of us at some point in our lifetime, at least. It's very common. The data is that women tend to experience clinical anxiety to a higher degree than males do, but it's unclear, at least in my mind, whether women are just more open and admitting to it, and men are trying to hide it more. It's unclear, but it is a real issue for all of us. At some point, for most of us, at some point. You get others who genetically they just don't experience much.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to know, and I know those watching would love to know, when did you realize that you wanted to become a clinical psychologist?
It was many years ago. So this was 26, 27 years ago. I had majored in psychology as an undergraduate. Wasn't really thinking at the time that I was going to become a psychologist. I just, as an undergrad, I wasn't really all that future thinking. But I, it was just the one subject in college that I loved. So I majored in it as an undergrad, graduated, went into the business world, and ended up with a job managing people. And I just hated the fact that my role as manager was to look out for the company's bottom line and to take care of the company. And I really cared about the people, and I wanted to focus on how do I help them and make their lives better. So after doing that for a while and hating every day of it, that's when I decided to go back to grad school and got my master's first because I wasn't sure that I wanted to go all the way for the PhD. And just the more I studied, the more I loved it, and went on for the PhD. And when I graduated, I didn't know that there was a such thing as an anxiety specialist. And I was just looking for my first job post PhD, and there was an organization looking for an anxiety specialist, and it was something, having had lots and lots of training in cognitive behavioral therapies, it was a natural fit for me. So I took the job and then just kind of fell in love with it and decided I don't really want to work with anything other than anxiety disorders and OCD. It's just a very rewarding specialty.
Very interesting, very insightful. What makes it rewarding for you?
Well, unlike some other things, you get to see people improve, grow, and change and meet goals right in front of you, because it's a fairly, compared to some things, it's a fairly quick treatment. So typically people are seen for give or take 10 to 12 weeks. And over that time, you can see people go from being, isolated, being, for some people, just really having a hard time even leaving their home, and see them get out of the house and go and face the world and start dating and make friends and get a job and things like that, go back to school. And that's very rewarding. And the other thing that I really like about it is you get to leave your office with your clients. So if somebody's dealing with social anxiety, my office is in a nice downtown area, and we get out and we walk around downtown and practice talking to people and going into stores and things like that. Again, that's a lot of fun for me, at least. It's tough for the clients, but it's incredibly helpful for them.
Wow. So it sounds like social anxiety, and clearly it falls under anxiety naturally. So when you say that you're helping some of your clients to speak to people,
Yes.
right? Well, I'm very curious to know. So what are some guiding tips that you have for people who suffer with social anxiety?
Well, I think it would be the same as for any. So all anxiety disorders are basically the same dance, just with different tunes, right? That there's something that provokes anxiety, and when we treat that anxiety like it's a threat and it's something we need to avoid, then we go out of our way to hide from situations that might trigger our anxiety. And whether that be social situations, public speaking, flying on airplanes, things like that. And so the way I like to think about anxiety disorders and anxiety in general, and it's really kind of the reason why I wrote this new book, is I like to think about anxiety as being our inner bodyguard, our inner companion. It's going to be with us for life. If we're a normal human being, we're going to experience anxiety, whether it rises to the level of a clinical disorder or just really anxious in certain situations. It's something that we can all relate to. And so there's a lot that's been written that talks about anxiety is in and of itself is a disease, as a monster that you have to vanquish, and that you're going to do some magic sort of treatment where you're going to be 100% anxiety free. And that's a lot of buzzwords in book marketing, is become anxiety free in 10 easy steps, things like that. And it gives people the wrong idea about anxiety. It makes anxiety out to be that threat. And when anxiety is a threat, we begin to feel anxiety about feeling anxiety. And so I think that it's far more useful to understand anxiety is our bodyguard. It's inside all of us, inside these little almond-shaped structures in our brain called the amygdala. And it's got one job, and that job is to protect us from threats. And it's kind of like a pit bull. When it gets a whiff of a threat, it sinks its teeth into it and doesn't want to let go. But it's doing that not to torture us. It's doing that because it's trying to help. It's always trying to help. And we need to, instead of looking at anxiety as our opponent, as something to defeat or vanquish, we want to look at it as something that we want to nurture and something that we want to teach. So we want to teach our anxiety whether something is dangerous or not. So if it's say at a party, when we actually have face-to-face parties again, coming up and talking to somebody, and anxiety says, oh my God, if you go and you talk to that person, you're going to get rejected. You're not going to be able to tolerate it. You're going to be humiliated. They're going to laugh at you, so on and so forth. And if you listen to anxiety, and again, anxiety is trying to help, but it's got the logical powers of a toddler, right? It's trying to help. If you listen to it, then you avoid talking to the person, and anxiety says, oh my God, it's good that you avoided talking to that person. Otherwise, all hell would have broken loose, right? Good. You did good, right? And so we're teaching our anxiety that something is dangerous when we avoid it. And so instead, if we're at the party and we're feeling anxious about talking to the person, we can shift into the mindset of, I'd like to be able to talk to people that's consistent with my value system and my goals in life. So I'm going to kind of take my anxiety by the hand. I'm going to bring it with me willingly as I talk to the person. And then I'm going to note that even if we didn't have a lengthy conversation, that it wasn't this disaster, this catastrophe that anxiety predicted it would be. And over time, when we do that, anxiety begins to learn. And so you're at a party and there's somebody there you want to talk to. Anxiety says, oh yeah, that's fine. We've done that before. I know that's not a big deal, right? But if we avoid it, it doesn't get to learn that, and instead learns threat. So the more we avoid, the more threat gets learned, the more anxious we feel. The more we approach, and the more anxiety gets to learn that something's not a threat, the less it'll howl the next time and the time after that.
Hence why your book is called Anxiety Beast in You, A Compassionate Guide to Living in an Increasingly Anxious World.
That's right.
What were some of the memorable moments that you've had when writing your second book?
Oh boy, memorable moments when I had writing it. Yeah, I got ill when writing it. So I signed a contract to write the book, and was very excited to write it, because I really want to help people learn to see anxiety in a different way. That we want to teach it and train it, not run from it or fight it. And then I got ill. I developed what's called hyperparathyroidism. So one of my parathyroid glands went ballistic on me, and it gave me this brain fog where I couldn't write. I couldn't even understand my notes of what I had written before this. And that's probably the most memorable part, where I struggled and I couldn't write. And then I had actually surgery where they removed one of my parathyroid glands. Within weeks, my brain was better, and then I finished it. Yeah, it was. I'll always remember that experience when I think about writing this book.
Oh my goodness. Wow, I'm so glad that you are okay and that you have recovered.
Oh yeah. It was a wild month or two.
Oh my gosh. Doctor, what advice would you give somebody, God forbid, if they experience such a like something very serious and intense like that in the midst of writing a book?
Well, what I'd say is, we need to accept kind of the situation as it is, right? If you fight it, you suffer. If you struggle against it, you suffer. And for me, it came down to, you know, I cannot write this right now. I could beat myself up and I could suffer and try to force myself to do something that really is just not possible right now. Or have some compassion. I'm going through a tough time. I can treat myself well. Don't pressure myself. Take care of myself physically, and then when I'm better, I'll get back to writing it. And if you're writing a book and you're going through something, be nice to yourself. Be gentle with yourself, and get through what you need to get through, and then get back to writing.
Hmm. Yes, I hear that. I hear that. I receive that. And I'm sure others will receive that as well. How would you describe your journey as an author? Like, how would you say that you've grown since your first book, Social Courage?
Well, I've gotten much more comfortable doing things like this. Interviews used to make me pretty uncomfortable. I'm not somebody that grew up, I'm an introvert. I didn't grow up loving the spotlight. And I still don't necessarily enjoy the spotlight, but I've come to actually really like doing these interviews and just meeting interesting people. And one of the things I like about the publishers, Exile Publishing, is they're an international publishing house, and so I get to do these really fun interviews with people all over the world, and get to meet some very interesting people. And that's probably one of the most rewarding, fun aspects of publishing.
Yes, because you are a speaker as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have grown. So would you say that you're still introverted, or are you coming out of it, or do you think maybe you're an ambivert?
Well, when we were in grad school, we would take the Myers-Briggs test and all the tests that we would ever use on clients, we would do that ourselves. And I came across as kind of center introvert, and I think that might even have been an underestimation. I, introversion is absolutely an okay way to be. There's nothing that there's nothing better about being an extrovert than being an introvert. In fact, during this quarantine time, I think us introverts actually are doing a lot better. We're not having that same level of cabin fever that we're getting a lot of our social need met virtually, and not feeling that same pressure to kind of get out and go to the clubs and meet lots of people.
Mhm.
I I I've come to really love being an introvert. I love having my quiet time, and I love pursuits like writing, I love to have just some quiet time at home, which I think I'm reaching my limit to that. But there is a certain element to that that's very comfortable for me. So after a day of talking to people through virtual therapy and things like that I'm doing now, I kind of enjoy hanging out with my kids, having a quiet evening, watching something on Netflix, and just having some peace and quiet. It actually The quarantine can really suit introverts in a way that really there I think there is some advantage to it these days.
Yes, because with the quarantine, introverts there, it's a comfortable time for introverts, would you say?
You know, if their basic
Depending.
needs are met, right? So if they're in a safe, loving home, and there's no issues with food or safety, a lot of my clients who are introverts are actually coping remarkably well. That they're enjoying it. And for some of, I have some that I've been working with who are really extreme introverts, and they've told me, my life isn't any different than it's ever been. That this is, I've always been self quarantining for, years and years, and it's how I like it. And there's issues to work on with that because they still need to be able to get their basic social needs met, which, we got to get out of the house for that.
Do you believe in the phrase faking it until you make it?
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely.
okay, why? Why?
Well, so like with anxiety, that if anxiety says, for example, public speaking is going to be awful. It's going to be catastrophic. You're going to be humiliated and rejected, and you are therefore, if you haven't done a lot of public speaking, you are going to be nervous and you're going to have strong urges to avoid it, and then you fake it till you make it. That you get up on stage, you bring your anxiety with you, you show it through experience, because anxiety learns through experience, not through logic. It learns through experience. Anxiety exists in a more primitive part of the brain, not the logic part of the brain. And so you bring it up and you fake it till you make it. You get up there, you give the talk, and then you're able to show anxiety. See, this was not awful. This was tolerable. Nobody threw anything at me. They didn't run me out of the room. It was okay, right? So
Mm,
fake it till you make it very often is part of exposure therapy.
wow. You did mention grad school. And I would love to know, with your education back when you were a student, was there anything that you took from those days of learning that you apply as a lecturer yourself?
Well, it's a good question. I try to instill humor into my classes. When I teach about a 4-hour evening class at Cal Poly here in San Luis Obispo, and that is a long time to be lecturing. So
Yeah.
we mix it up with videos and activities, and really some good hands-on sort of things that I none of it's things that I made up. It's all stuff that I pulled from kind of cherished professors from grad school.
Okay. All right. So, what do you want people to take away from Anxiety Beast and you?
What I want them to take away is that anxiety is not your enemy. Anxiety's not, it's never trying to hurt you, even though at times it hurts. When you treat anxiety like your enemy, when you even think about it as, this is my inner bully, this is my inner demon, this is my, it then trains your anxiety to be anxious about your anxiety, right? So it's kind of this double whammy. So what I want people to take from that book is, teach your anxiety. Don't hate your anxiety. We even though most of the time anxiety is overzealous and it gets it wrong, we need to have it because the world still is dangerous at times. And if we lost the ability to experience anxiety, we would be dead or disabled. We have to have anxiety, and we have to have it for a lifetime. So we want it to be as discerning as it can be. We want it to know that if we need to public speak or fly in an airplane, We want it to learn that these things are not threats. And if we treat them as if they're threats, then anxiety is going to do its job and try to protect us from it by triggering that fight or flight response. But if we begin to teach it, and you know, when you're feeling anxious, instead of kind of struggling with it, instead of trying to push it away, hold it gently, hold it softly, soften your muscles. Not that you're trying to kind of push the emotion away, but soften so it's like you're holding a colicky crying baby, right? It's unpleasant that the baby's crying, but you're not going to squeeze it. You're not going to throw it out the window. You're going to hold it gently, and you're going to hold it with compassion. And when you do that with your experience of anxiety, the suffering with that anxiety tends to diminish dramatically. And then the anxiety that you do have has the opportunity to learn that the situation that you're facing isn't an actual likely threat.
That is so well said. Who do you want to, you're very welcome. Who do you want to pick up the book? Because it's not just going to be people who have anxiety, right? And I imagine people are going to also get it for people they know who are anxious.
Yeah.
Stuff. But yeah, who do you really want to have this book?
So I wrote it in some ways, somewhat of a selfish motive, in the sense that I want to give it to my clients. So if I have a client that I've never seen before, they come in and they're struggling with anxiety. They just don't understand what anxiety is all about. Maybe they've bought into the notion that I need to do something to cure it, to make it go away and leave me in peace forever, which is destined to fail. I want to be able to give them the book. There's much of it is a workbook format, and help guide them through changing how they relate to their anxiety. And so I think anybody who's dealt with anxiety, or anybody who has someone that they care about that deals with anxiety, I think could benefit. And I'm hoping that that doctors and therapists could have that as a resource to offer to their clients that are and patients that are coming to them with anxiety issues.
And on that note, Dr. Eric Goodman, everyone. Dr. Eric Goodman, it was such a pleasure to talk with you. Wow. I mean, there's so many more questions I could have asked and everything. Let everyone know how they can keep up with you and how they can get Anxiety Beast in You, which I understand was originally supposed to come out in June. And or is it still?
It was originally supposed to come out in June. They're trying to make it happen for next month. I think I'm due to get my own copies. I think within the first couple of weeks of May. So I think right now it's available. Oh, I know right now it's available to pre-order on Amazon. And as far as following me, I'm on Twitter at Dr. Eric Goodman would be how you follow me. And yeah, I'm hoping the book will help people.
I'm sure it will.
I'm the idea of the day.
Say that again?
I'm hoping it'll help people dealing with the anxiety that's just so prevalent these days.
It really is. Yes, it is. I can't wait to read the book myself. So are there any last remarks that you want? What do you want people to know about you as an author before we wrap this up? What do you want people to know about you as an author?
Well, I know that I could sell more books if I added somewhere in the title, cure your anxiety, rid yourself of anxiety, add the easy way to get rid of anxiety forever, that is so prevalent. The research doesn't back that up. We don't get rid of anxiety forever completely. And if we did, we would be in big trouble as a species. We wouldn't do well. We need to have anxiety, but we want to have a relationship with the anxiety where we're not suffering with it. And so for me, I would much rather sell less books and present an honest and useful approach than adding any of those marketing buzzwords that are just they're destined to lead people to feeling like they're failing, when inevitably anxiety comes up again and again, as is normal for humans.
And are you going to write your next book? Is there another book in the works?
Yeah, there's a couple of books that I've been toying around with. One is an anxiety book, a compassionate graphic novel for teens and young. Yeah, the book that I wrote had a wonderful illustrator, Louise Gardner, who is brilliant, and she's incredible. And so she and I have been talking about collaborating on a graphic novel for teens. So that's what I've been toying with right now. We'll see. I'm not 100% set on that yet. Right now, all of my attention has been about how do I help my clients using teletherapy, which is something I've never done in my life. As a matter of fact, I've never used Zoom ever in my life. I never heard of Zoom until a month ago. So that's taken pretty much every bit of my attention over the last month or so.
Mm-hmm. So would you say, even though this is very new for you, this is a very new format of your practicing, would you also say that it just gives you more experience and makes you versatile?
Yeah, so I used to see people who would drive in for, from the Central Valley of California, where there's not a lot of anxiety specialists, and they would drive for, an hour and a half each way for an appointment. And I never wanted to consider telehealth before because it just seemed like something that not many people did. And now it's great. I'm going to continue to telehealth for people who could benefit from it, probably for the rest of my career. So I suspect that most therapists around the planet will do the same.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're so needed and so necessary, like more than ever. We need people like you, doctor. And by the way, I think that you should absolutely go for that graphic novel. I think you should absolutely go for it.
I
All right.
appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
No problem, no problem. Hey, we have to talk again sometime, Dr. Eric Goodman, okay? It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yes, same here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And to all the listeners, until next time, so booking cool.